$2.7 billion, that is the estimated value of American radar infrastructure that Iran has already destroyed or severely degraded across the Gulf region so far, according to U.S. officials and satellite analysis. And the truly shocking part is the weapons responsible for much of that damage were extremely cheap attack drones and ballistic missiles that cost only a tiny fraction of the systems they wiped out. But here's the question that almost no one is asking yet. If low-cost drones can erase billion-dollar radar systems this easily, what does that mean for the entire missile defense network protecting Israel and the Gulf right now? Because behind the scenes, something unusual has already started happening inside the U.S. military. Something that signals this crisis is far more serious than the public realizes. 6 THAAD missile defense systems have now been pulled out of South Korea and rushed urgently to the Middle East, a move that military analysts say would normally take months of planning, but this time happened almost overnight. Reports say U.S. military convoys quietly transported these systems in the middle of the night under heavy security, suggesting Washington is scrambling to reinforce a defensive network that may already be under extreme pressure. U.S. officials speaking to the Associated Press admitted something even more concerning, that American forces are struggling to stop continuous waves of Iranian drones that keep appearing across the region. That does not sound like a military comfortably in control of the battlefield. That sounds like a military racing to plug holes in a defense network that may already be cracking. And the reason this matters so much is because the systems being hit are not ordinary radar stations. They are the eyes and ears of Israel's entire missile defense architecture. Systems like Arrow, THAAD, Patriot, and Aegis depend heavily on these radars to detect launches early and calculate interception paths before missiles reach their targets. When those radars go offline, Israel's warning time for incoming Iranian ballistic missiles suddenly becomes shorter, and every second lost could mean the difference between interception and impact. In fact, an Indian journalist who was stranded inside Israel during the first week of this conflict reported something deeply alarming after returning home. According to his account, some Iranian missiles were now landing without the usual air raid sirens sounding beforehand, meaning civilians had little to no warning before explosions occurred. If that report is even partially accurate, it suggests that something inside the early warning system may already be failing, and that raises a much bigger question. What exactly happened to the radar network that once protected the entire region? Over the next few minutes, we are going to break down the chain of events that began on the very first day of this war, and how a series of precise strikes may have quietly reshaped the balance of air defense across the Middle East. And as you will see, the story starts with a single radar installation that Iran appears to have targeted before anything else. On the opening day of the war, February 28th, Iran prioritized a target that surprised many military analysts. It was not an airbase, not a command center, not even a missile battery. It was a radar. Specifically, the AN/FPS-132 early warning radar positioned near Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the largest U.S. military installation anywhere in the Middle East. This radar was not just another sensor in the network. It was arguably the first line of detection for the entire Gulf region. The system could detect ballistic missile launches from distances approaching 5,000 kilometers and instantly share that information with every missile defense system connected to the network. That includes THAAD batteries, Patriot systems, Aegis destroyers in the Gulf, and even Israel's Arrow missile defense launchers. In other words, this radar was the system that gave everyone else precious time to react before missiles arrived. Qatar later confirmed that 2 ballistic missiles targeted the country during the opening phase of the conflict. One of those missiles was intercepted successfully, but the second one struck near the Al Udeid base area. Satellite imagery later suggested that a critical radar site north of the base may also have been damaged during that strike. While the publicly available evidence does not confirm the radar was completely destroyed, the possibility alone raised immediate concern among defense analysts. Because the AN/FPS-132 radar costs around $1.1 billion, and only a very small number of these strategic early warning systems exist worldwide, Iran targeting it on the first day suggests something important. They may have been trying to blind the entire network before launching further missile attacks. And if that theory is correct, then the next development becomes even more significant. Within just 72 hours of the war beginning, satellite imagery confirmed the destruction of another critical system. This time, it was the AN/TPY-2X band radar stationed at Muwafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan. This radar serves as the primary sensor for the U.S. Army's THAAD missile defense system. Without its radar, a THAAD battery loses the ability to precisely track incoming ballistic missiles, dramatically reducing its effectiveness. Bloomberg reported the destruction on March 6th, citing a U.S. official who confirmed the loss publicly. Meanwhile, CNN released Planet Labs satellite images taken on March the 2nd, showing the aftermath of the strike. The images revealed 5 large radar trailers either destroyed or severely damaged. Nearby, 2 massive craters roughly 13 meters wide could be seen in the sand, suggesting multiple strike attempts against the site. What makes this strike even more remarkable is the location of the base itself. Muwafaq Salti Air Base sits more than 500 miles from Iran and hosts over 60 American aircraft, including F-35 fighters and F-15E Strike Eagles. Despite being surrounded by advanced military assets, the radar system was still successfully destroyed. And here's an unusual detail that raises even more questions. A Chinese commercial satellite company called Mizar Vision had publicly released imagery confirming the THAAD deployment at that base only weeks earlier. 2 weeks after that imagery appeared online, the radar system was reduced to rubble. Some reports have suggested Russia may have shared targeting information with Iran using commercial satellite data, although this claim remains unproven in public sources. The Jerusalem Post reported that Iranian forces may have been receiving targeting intelligence derived from open-source satellite imagery. Whether that pipeline actually existed or not remains unclear, but the timing has certainly attracted attention among defense analysts. NR Jensen Jones, Director of Armament Research Services, told CNN that the AN-TPY-2 radar is essentially the heart of a THAAD battery. Losing even one of these radars, he said, is operationally significant for missile defense planning. Tom Carrico, a missile defense analyst at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, was even more direct. He described the loss as a huge blow and pointed out that the U.S. Army's THAAD force already operates below its required strength. According to him, there are not exactly spare TPY-2 radars sitting in storage waiting to be deployed. In fact, only around 20 of these radars have ever been manufactured since the 1990s. There are no surplus units, no reserve stockpile, and no quick replacement timeline. That means every radar destroyed creates a gap in the defensive network that cannot easily be filled. And here is where the story becomes even more surprising. Most people assume these radar systems are protected by multiple layers of air defense, such as Patriot interceptors, electronic warfare systems, and close-range weapons. But the radar in Jordan appears to have been destroyed by single-use attack drones, costing somewhere between $20,000 and $60,000 each. That means a drone worth the price of a small car may have eliminated a radar system worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Western air defense batteries usually rely on a single primary radar for tracking targets. Once that radar is destroyed, the entire battery becomes effectively blind. Russian systems like the S-400 often deploy multiple supporting radars for redundancy, but Western designs generally do not. What happened in Jordan may therefore expose a structural vulnerability that only becomes visible during real combat. And what happened next suggests Jordan and Qatar were only the beginning. Satellite analysis from multiple outlets later pointed toward possible strikes on radar-related facilities in the United Arab Emirates. 2 locations drew particular attention: Al Ruwais and Al Sadr. At Al Ruwais, satellite images show 3 buildings hit between February 28th and March 1st. Some of those structures appear to be protective shelters that may have housed radar trailers. At the Al Sadr site, 4 structures show visible strike damage from the same time period. Analysts say the strike patterns at both locations appear similar, suggesting coordinated targeting. Ukrainian defense outlet Defense Express reported that available imagery appears to show burned equipment at positions where TPY-2 radars were believed to be deployed. However, the resolution of the satellite images is too low to confirm whether the radars themselves were inside the shelters at the time. If even one additional radar was destroyed there, it could mean another THAAD battery has already been severely degraded. And remember, there are only about 20 of these radars in existence worldwide. That possibility alone carries enormous strategic weight. Meanwhile, in Saudi Arabia, another mysterious strike may have occurred near Prince Sultan Air Base. Satellite imagery from March 1st shows smoke rising from a compound where a Thamad radar shelter had previously been observed. Earlier January, imagery suggested a radar antenna had been positioned inside that structure facing northeast toward Iran. But whether the radar was still there when the strike happened remains unknown. Saudi officials have not commented publicly, and U.S. defense officials declined to discuss the incident, citing operational security. In Bahrain, the situation appears equally complicated. CNN reported that Iranian strikes had damaged satellite communication terminals, radar installations, and intelligence equipment across several U.S. bases. The report suggested the attacks were part of a deliberate attempt to disrupt American communications architecture throughout the region. There were also reports of damage to radar and communication infrastructure in Kuwait. Some of those systems included lower-value radars like the AN-TPS-59, which costs roughly $70 million. Iranian officials claim they destroyed 10 American radar systems across the Gulf, though that number has not been independently verified. What can be confirmed publicly so far is at least 1 THAAD radar destroyed and several other radar facilities damaged or possibly targeted. But here's where the implications start expanding beyond the Gulf. Because these radars were not just defending American bases, they were also part of Israel's early warning network. The AN/FPS-132 radar in Qatar provided early detection data for Israeli missile defense systems. Meanwhile, AN/TPY-2 radars fed high-precision tracking data into the integrated network used by Arrow, Patriot, and Aegis interceptors. Without those sensors feeding information into the system, Israel's warning time for incoming missiles becomes shorter and interception accuracy may drop. Israeli military analyst Ron Ben Yishai wrote that damage to the Qatar radar could shorten warning time for missile launches heading toward Israel or Jordan. He noted that Aegis destroyers in the Gulf can partially compensate for the lost coverage, but even he emphasized that word, partially. That means the network may still function, but not as effectively as before. And if warning times are shrinking, the consequences could be deadly. Remember the Indian journalist who reported missiles landing without sirens. According to him, some civilians were killed even inside shelters that were believed to be safe. He also claimed reporters were restricted from documenting certain strike locations. Israeli authorities strongly control what the media can film during wartime, making independent verification difficult. The Israeli Defense Forces have not directly denied the radar losses. Instead, they stated that Iran has targeted regional military infrastructure during the conflict. That statement acknowledges the attacks without specifying what exactly was hit. Meanwhile, both sides are aggressively shaping the narrative of the war. Iran claimed it had sunk the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln. U.S. Central Command immediately denied that claim and released photos showing the carrier operating normally. Fact-checkers later traced some viral proof videos to footage from the Arma 3 military simulation game. On the other side, the Pentagon has refused to discuss the operational status of several systems in the region, citing security concerns. U.S. Central Command says Iranian missile launches have dropped by about 90% and drone attacks by 83%. Those numbers, however, have not been independently verified. Some analysts believe the reduced launch rate could simply mean Iran is conserving ammunition for a longer war. And then came another development that raised even more eyebrows among military planners. The United States quietly relocated 6 THAAD missile defense systems from South Korea to the Middle East. South Korean Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yul confirmed on March 7th that discussions about the relocation were already underway. Videos later circulating online appear to show U.S. military trucks transporting THAAD equipment under cover of darkness. Moving that many systems at once is not a routine logistical shift. It signals a strategic level emergency. Pulling defenses from the Korean Peninsula weakens deterrence against North Korea at a time when tensions in the Pacific remain high. It also sends a signal that Washington considers the Middle East situation extremely serious. Globally, the United States only operates 8 THAAD batteries. Those batteries defend regions including South Korea, Guam, and the Gulf. Losing even one radar from that network creates a gap that can only be filled by weakening coverage somewhere else. Missile defense planners around the world are now calculating what that shift means for global security. During a previous conflict in June 2025, the United States fired more than 150 THAAD interceptors in just 12 days. Each interceptor costs roughly $15.5 million. That means over $2.3 billion worth of interceptors were used in less than 2 weeks. Analysts say the current conflict appears even more intense. Meanwhile, defense companies Lockheed Martin and RTX were reportedly called to the White House as the Pentagon pushed for faster weapons production. Officials said manufacturers agreed to dramatically increase production of advanced missile defense systems. When defense CEOs are summoned during an active war, it usually means the inventory is being consumed faster than expected. The economic consequences are also spreading outward. Oil prices briefly surged close to $120 per barrel as tensions rose around the Strait of Hormuz. Shipping alerts showed around 150 oil and LNG tankers waiting near the strait as uncertainty grew. Bahrain's national oil company Bapco declared force majeure after strikes hit its refinery complex. Analysts at the Center for Strategic and International Studies estimated U.S. operations are costing about $891 million per day. That means roughly $3.7 billion was spent during the first 100 hours of the conflict alone. And most of that spending was never included in the Pentagon's annual budget. Meanwhile, global powers are trying to stop the conflict from escalating further. China has publicly called for an immediate ceasefire. Russia has also urged both sides to halt hostilities. France says it is working with China on diplomatic efforts aimed at de-escalation. But Iran has rejected those proposals and laid out its own conditions. An Iranian foreign ministry spokesman said the power to stop the war lies entirely in Iran's hands. He stated that Iran will only halt operations once it receives a firm guarantee that aggression will never happen again. He added that the opposing side must also accept responsibility for past actions. In his words, Iran now believes it holds the upper hand. Whether that claim is true or not remains heavily debated among analysts, but the confidence behind the statement suggests Tehran believes it has shifted the balance of power. And that brings us back to the original question. Roughly $2.7 billion in radar systems damaged or destroyed across multiple countries. A rare AN-FPS 132 early warning radar in Qatar reportedly hit. A confirmed AN-TPY-2 radar destroyed in Jordan with no replacement available. Only about 20 of those radars exist worldwide. Cheap drones costing less than $60,000 damaging systems worth hundreds of millions. Israel's missile warning time potentially shortened. Reports of missiles landing without sirens. 6 THAAD systems pulled from South Korea in a desperate reinforcement effort. U.S. officials admitting they are struggling to stop continuous waves of drones. Oil prices spiking and global shipping freezing near Hormuz. Nearly $900 million being spent every single day on military operations. Iran declaring publicly that it believes it now holds the advantage. And yet one critical question remains unanswered by both governments. Can this radar and sensor network actually be rebuilt fast enough before interceptor stockpiles begin running out? Because if the sensors disappear faster than the defenses can be rebuilt, the entire balance of missile defense across the region could change dramatically. The war is only about 10 days old, and already the radar network that once protected the region is under serious strain. And the uncomfortable truth is this: radars can take years to replace, but drones take days to build. If that imbalance continues, the next phase of this conflict could look very different from the first. But what do you think? Is this war slipping out of control, or are these early losses being exaggerated? I want to hear your thoughts, so drop your opinion in the comments below and join the discussion. And if you want more deep analysis on global conflicts, defense technology, and the hidden strategies shaping world events, make sure you subscribe to Market Mindset, like the video, and share it so more people can understand what is really happening behind the headlines.